I was 17 when it happened, and I still can't use a kitchen drawer without getting nervous. It was during spring break, and my parents had left for a 3-day anniversary trip. I had the house to myself, something I'd been begging for all year. Nothing felt out of the ordinary at first, until that first night. Our kitchen is small, but cozy with oak cabinets and old white countertops my mom still loves. I was watching a movie on the couch when I realized I forgot to lock the back door. It's one of those things that sticks in your mind. Suddenly, I got up to double check like I always do. The door was locked just like I thought, so I turned to head back to the living room. That's when I heard it. A faint metallic clink from the kitchen. I stopped mid-step, thinking maybe something fell off the counter. I waited, holding my breath, for another sound. At first, I told myself it was probably a spoon settling in the sink, but the sink was empty. I had cleaned up dinner an hour ago. A sharp clink, like silverware striking, broke the silence, followed by a soft scrape, as if something shifted within a drawer. My stomach clenched. The sound emanated from the lower drawer, by the oven, the one housing the knives. I stood, transfixed, listening to what should have been absolute quiet. Then came another clink, more deliberate. This time, it wasn't something falling. It was something moving. I said out loud, "Is someone there?" immediately regretting how scared my voice sounded. Of course, no one replied. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, my phone gripped tight in my hand. I didn't call anyone, though it felt stupid to panic over a noise. When I reached the drawer, I crouched slowly and placed my hand on the handle. It felt cold, like it had been sitting open for hours, though I knew it hadn't. I held my breath and yanked it open in one quick motion. Nothing, just the same set of knives neatly arranged in their tray. But something was off. One of the bigger knives had shifted, like it had been picked up and put back in a rush. The tray itself looked slightly crooked, like it had been moved or lifted. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. I shut the drawer and stood up quickly. I turned all the kitchen lights on, trying to shake the unease. There was no sign anyone had been there. I even opened the pantry, checked the back door again. Everything was locked. Everything was in place. So why did it feel like I wasn't alone? I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe the drawer wasn't completely closed earlier. Maybe the house just creaked weird at night. That's what I kept repeating as I got ready for bed still. I left the kitchen light on before going upstairs. I had trouble sleeping, which isn't like me. Every time the house settled, I flinched. I kept staring at the hallway through the crack in my door. At one point, I swear I heard faint footsteps downstairs, but I told myself it was the fridge cycling around 3:12 a.m. I woke up suddenly, not from a nightmare, just a weird alert, feeling like something had tugged my mind awake. I sat up listening carefully, and that's when I heard it again. Clink. This time, the sound was more rhythmic, almost like someone was rearranging the knives one by one. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My heart pounded. Descending the stairs was a terrifying prospect, yet the uncertainty of not knowing was far worse. Each step groaned under my weight, louder than memory served. As I crept forward, desperate for silence, the kitchen light pierced the gloom, but the room itself felt wrong, the air thick with an unspoken dread. At the foot of the stairs, I froze, my gaze fixed on the drawer. The drawer was open about 2 inches. I hadn't left it like that. I would have remembered. I stayed frozen at the edge of the hallway, afraid to step into the kitchen. That's when the sound came again, this time from behind the fridge. It was a soft thud, like something had moved, or been dropped. I backed up, retreating up the stairs without even checking. I locked my bedroom door and sat in bed, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Maybe a mouse, maybe something fell, but knives don't clink like that from mice, and nothing had fallen. At least, not that I saw. I stayed up until sunrise, door locked, lights on. By morning, I finally talked myself down. I went back to the kitchen like it was any normal day. Everything looked fine in the daylight. The drawer was shut, again, though I didn't remember doing it. I checked the fridge area, the back door, even under the sink. No signs of anything unusual, but I still couldn't shake that feeling. Later that afternoon, my friend Ryan came over. I told him what happened, and he laughed it off, saying, "Maybe I had a dream." I wanted to believe that too. So we hung out in the kitchen, playing cards just like we used to. It helped a little. But around 6:45 p.m., while Ryan was pouring a soda, he suddenly froze. He looked down at the drawer and asked, "Why is this one warm?" I looked over, and he was touching the knife drawer handle. I walked over and felt it myself. He was right. It was noticeably warm, like it had been heated from inside. That's when Ryan looked at me, suddenly serious, and said, "Dude, I think something's off with your house." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the drawer that night. I kept my bedroom door open. I wanted to hear everything clearly. No surprises. Around 1:30 a.m. the sound started again. The same clinking, slow, steady, and unmistakable. This time I didn't freeze. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed downstairs, careful not to let the stairs creak. The kitchen was lit only by the dim light above the stove. The drawer was open all the way now, and every knife had been pulled out and placed neatly on the counter. They were perfectly aligned, like someone had spent time setting them up deliberately. I should have left right then, but I was too caught in the moment. I took one step into the kitchen, phone trembling in my hand. That's when I heard it, a whisper, not a voice, not exactly, just a hushed breath near my right ear. My whole body locked up. I turned, expecting to see someone behind me, but there was no one there, just the empty living room and my own shallow breathing. I backed away slowly, never turning my back to the kitchen. My heart pounding, I locked myself in my room upstairs. I texted Ryan. "You were right." He didn't respond until the next morning, and his only reply was, "Get out of that house." When my parents returned, I told them everything. The next day, my mom didn't believe me, and my dad laughed it off, suggesting I might have been dreaming. However, later that week, I found him staring at the knife drawer one morning, looking pale. He said it opened by itself while he was making coffee. Said it felt like someone was standing behind him the whole time. He wouldn't admit it outright, but I could tell it shook him. After that, none of us talked about it again. A few months later, we had a kitchen remodel done. My parents didn't say why, but they had all the drawers replaced. The old knife drawer was taken out and hauled away. I watched it go, sitting alone on the curb, like something discarded, but not forgotten. Things have been quiet since then. No more noises, no more clinking. Still, I don't go near the new drawer unless I absolutely have to, and every now and then, late at night, I still hear that faint metallic sound in my head. I don't know if it was something paranormal or just something wrong with that drawer. I don't try to explain it anymore. All I know is that something about that space didn't want to be ignored, and it still lingers in my thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I was 24 when it happened. My mom had passed away the winter before, and I'd recently moved back into her house, the one I grew up in. At first, it felt comforting, familiar photos on the wall, the scent of lavender still lingering in the hallway. But after the first few nights alone, the silence became unsettling. One of my strongest memories of her was the way she hummed while cooking. It wasn't any song I recognized, just a soft, repetitive tune that she seemed to make up. She'd hum it while stirring soup, boiling tea, or slicing vegetables. It always made the kitchen feel alive, even on gloomy days after she passed. I didn't hear that humming again, not until about a week after I moved in. It was a little past midnight, and I was finishing some dishes before heading to bed. That's when I heard it, the soft rise and fall of her old humming coming from behind me, near the stove. I froze. I turned around quickly, heart racing, but the kitchen was completely empty.
The lights were on. Everything looked normal. Clean counters, shut, drawers, nothing out of place. I even checked the back door, thinking maybe sound was drifting in from outside, but it was locked. Trying to be rational, I convinced myself I was just overtired. Maybe I had been humming without realizing it.
Echoing an old habit. But that didn't explain why it sounded so distinctly like her. I remembered the exact pacing of her hum, and that's what I had heard. The next night, I stayed up late again, this time, deliberately listening. I didn't cook anything, didn't make any noise, just sat quietly at the table around the same time.
Just after midnight, the soft, humming tune from the kitchen began again. This time, I grabbed my phone and started recording, holding my breath and standing completely still. But when I played it back, there was nothing, not a whisper, not even background noise, just silence. I tried not to let it get to me, but sleep became harder. I began avoiding the kitchen at night. Something about that humming, without a body or presence behind it, felt unnatural, even though it wasn't aggressive or loud. It was deeply disturbing in its familiarity. Then one night I accidentally left a wooden spoon in a pot of water on the stove. I had meant to make tea, but got distracted by a phone call. When I returned, I found the stove turned off, the pot empty, and the spoon lying on the counter dry. I hadn't touched it the next few days. I tried staying out of the kitchen as much as I could. I'd order food or eat in my room, only going in during daylight hours. But even then, sometimes I thought I caught a whisper of that humming when I passed by, faint, like a memory, breathing through the walls. One afternoon, I decided to test something. I placed a voice recorder on the kitchen counter and left it running while I went for a walk. When I returned and listened, most of it was quiet until the 22-minute mark. A low humming began, steady and unmistakably familiar. My throat tightened. I replayed it again over and over, trying to deny what I knew. Deep down it was her. I would have recognized that hum anywhere, but she was gone. She was supposed to be gone. Something was wrong with this house, or with me. I started having dreams again, ones I hadn't had since childhood. Dreams were
walk into the kitchen and see her at the stove back turned, stirring something, but when she turned around, her face was never fully visible. It was always hazy like fog behind glass. One night I woke up to the smell of burnt toast. I ran into the kitchen expecting flames, but nothing was cooking. The toaster was unplugged, cold to the touch.
Yet that same humming was floating through the air, like it belonged here. That night, I finally called my older cousin Jenna. She and Mom had been close, and Jenna always believed in energy and things beyond the physical. When I told her everything, she didn't even sound surprised, just sad. She might not know she's gone. She said, "Jenna told me I should try speaking to her. If she's stuck, maybe she needs to be acknowledged." The thought made my skin crawl, but I agreed. That night, I stood in the kitchen around midnight, voice shaking as I said, "Mom, if you are here, I hear you, but you're not supposed to be." The humming stopped immediately. For the first time in over a week, The house was silent, a quiet that felt heavier than any sound. I waited, but nothing happened. No breeze, no flicker, no spoon moving, just a dense, watchful stillness. The next few nights were peaceful. No humming, no strange smells, no movements. I started to believe it was over, that she'd heard me and let go. But then, I made a mistake. I went into her old room, something I'd avoided since I moved in, to find an old photo album. The door creaked louder than I remembered. Dust covered everything. Her perfume bottles, old scarves, the sewing machine she never used, but refused to give away. I walked toward her closet and opened the top shelf to grab the album. And that's when I heard it again, humming right behind me, not from the hallway or the living room, right behind me. I turned so fast. I nearly tripped over her rug. There was no one there, but the smell of her favorite hand cream filled the room, and on the mirror above her dresser, something new, a single smudge, curved, like a fingerprint or a mouth. My reflection looked pale, frightened. I backed out slowly and closed the door, without looking again. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every sound magnified. Then around 2:07 a.m., I heard something that made my chest lock, a kitchen drawer sliding open, then the silverware rattling gently, just like she used to organize it. I waited for it to stop, but it didn't. It continued, soft, but deliberate. I couldn't bring myself to move. I stayed in bed, eyes wide, heart pounding in my ears. The humming started again, faint and cracked, like an old record. It was closer than before, right outside my bedroom door. Now I didn't remember closing it, but I could see the handle slowly turning. Not fast, not jerky, just slow, steady motion, like someone unsure if they were welcome. Suddenly it stopped. Everything did. No more humming, no drawer sounds, no creaking. Silence rushed back in like a vacuum. I stayed frozen for what felt like an hour before, finally whispering, "Mom, please, I'm not ready for this." The next morning, I found the photo album sitting on the kitchen table. I had left it in her room. I didn't touch it. I didn't even sit down. I packed a bag and left the house for 3 days. When I came back, everything felt colder, but nothing had moved. I sold the house 2 months later. The new owners were a quiet couple. A few weeks after moving in, they emailed me about a weird humming they kept hearing in the kitchen. Said it sounded kind of comforting, actually. I never replied. I don't know what I believe anymore. I just know something stayed in that house. Something that hummed like my mom, walked like her, moved like her, but wasn't her. At least not anymore. I was 24 when the incident occurred, and I still can't fully grasp what happened. It was a typical Friday night, and my friend Sadie was at my apartment for one of our regular cooking sessions. We'd been friends since college, and we both found solace in the kitchen, dicing vegetables and sharing jokes. However, that night deviated from our usual routine. Everything started off normal music, playing low in the background. Ingredients laid out, wine half poured. Sadie was by the stove frying onions, while I prepped the garlic on the counter. I remember the warm, cozy smell of olive oil and herbs drifting in the air. But then I noticed her stop stirring and go unnaturally still. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning to face her. She didn't answer right away, just slowly looked toward the corner of the room. There's a tall cabinet in that spot, old and wooden, with nothing behind it, but a blank wall. She blinked, shook her head, and said, "Thought I saw something, never mind." But her voice was tight, forced. We laughed it off, as people do when things don't make sense. Sadie tried to go back to frying, but I caught her glancing toward that corner more than once. I looked too. Nothing was there. No movement, no light tricks, just the cabinet and shadow had always cast when the ceiling bulb was on. Later that night, we sat down with our plates halfway through eating. Sadie dropped her fork with a loud clatter. I jumped, startled, and she looked pale. "It's standing there again," she whispered. I turned my head toward the corner, heart pounding. Still nothing, just the same cabinet and darkened sliver of wall. That night stuck with me because I could feel her fear. Sadie wasn't the type to spook easily, and she wasn't joking.
I didn't sleep well, replaying her face in that weird moment in the kitchen. The next day I asked her what she saw. A figure, she said, quietly tall, lean, just behind me watching. I almost brushed it off until the next weekend. Sadie came over again. Same setup, same vibe. We decided to make something simple.
Grilled sandwiches and soup. We laughed about work, talked about a weird dream she had, and started cooking like nothing had happened. Then it happened again. Mid-conversation, she froze. Her eyes darted to the corner like a magnet. "Don't freak out," she said barely above a whisper. "But it's back." This time her voice cracked a little. I didn't turn immediately. My hands were shaking. I was scared that if I looked, I might actually see it too. This time I did look slowly, hesitantly, like my brain was preparing to be wrong. But something was there, or at least something felt like it had just been there. The space behind the cabinet looked darker than usual. The air had that strange, silent weight, like after someone leaves a room. Sadie wouldn't cook anymore. After that, she sat on the couch, scrolling her phone. But she kept glancing toward the kitchen like she expected something to walk out. I kept asking if she was okay, and she kept replying, "I just don't like that corner." The corner had never bothered us before. Later, after she left, I stood in the kitchen alone and tried to make sense of it. I even took my phone flashlight and checked behind the cabinet. Nothing, no mold, no leak, no marks, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off in that space. The atmosphere just felt wrong. A week later, Sadie came back, but only after I promised we'd order takeout. Instead, we sat at my dining table, eating noodles and pretending like things were normal. I caught her glancing over my shoulder a few times. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know if it was back. Right before she left, she stopped at the door and turned around slowly. "It's not behind the cabinet anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tonight it was standing in the kitchen doorway. Without waiting for a reply, she fled, as if speaking it aloud would amplify its presence. That statement haunted me for days. I felt a constant sense of unease, as if I wasn't alone in my own apartment. While doing dishes, I'd suddenly feel a frigid breath, as if someone stood mere inches behind me. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, even though I lived alone. I don't even remember when I started doing that. Then one day, it changed. I had a different friend over Mark, someone from work. We were cooking pasta together, joking around. It felt good to break the tension. But mid-boil Mark suddenly turned his head toward the living room. His smile dropped. "You got someone else here?" My stomach sank. "No." "Why?" I asked. He blinked a few times and didn't answer for a second. Then he tried to laugh it off. "Thought I saw someone behind the couch." "Never mind." I didn't say a word. I just looked at the spot and felt that now familiar wrongness settle in again. Sadie wasn't the only one seeing it. That was when I knew it wasn't in her head. It wasn't just about her. This thing, whatever it was tied to the act of cooking. The same pattern. Two people. The kitchen shed focus, and then it shows up just out of sight, just behind. After that night with Mark, I started testing it. I invited other people over to cook with me, just to see what would happen. It didn't take long before patterns emerged. Every time when the food was nearly done, one of them would glance at a shadowed corner and get quiet. My friend Nora was the first to ask, "Did someone just walk by your hallway?" She described it as tall, unmoving, but somehow blurry. She said she couldn't see a face, just a shape watching from the edge, and always behind someone else. Even people who didn't believe in anything weird started reacting, like Matt, who just stopped mid-sentence, eyes fixed on the window. "That guy outside," he said. "Why is he just standing there?" I didn't even look. I already knew. No one would be there when I checked. Eventually I told Sadie about it. We sat at a diner, not at my place. I didn't want to risk anything. She listened without blinking and said, "I told you it follows us. It doesn't like being ignored." I asked her what she meant by that, but she just stared into her coffee and said nothing more. That night, I cooked dinner for myself in silence, every light in the house blazing. No music, no TV, just the gentle rumble of boiling water and the ragged sound of my own breathing. I was plating my meal when the lights flickered, and a floorboard creaked directly behind me. I turned slowly but saw nothing, yet the air felt thick, as if the room, though empty, was suddenly crowded. I stood there with my plate in hand, unable to move. As the shadow near the hallway grew just a little darker, I stopped inviting people over after that, stopped cooking entirely for a while, just ate takeout or sandwiches, but even then, I'd catch glimpses in reflections, movement that didn't match mine, a tall form where no one should be. It felt like it wasn't tied to cooking anymore. Weeks passed, and I thought maybe it was over. Then Sadie called, her voice low and frantic. "I think it's following me now. I saw it yesterday, outside my mirror, just behind me." I didn't know what to say. I just felt cold, like it was never going to leave us alone. This wasn't just a haunted corner or cursed apartment. It was something drawn to attention, drawn to presence, like it needs witnesses to exist. The more we notice it, the more real it becomes. Maybe that's why it always waits in the background, waiting to be seen. I haven't cooked with anyone since. Haven't had anyone over at all. But I still feel it sometimes when I reach for the stove or pass by the kitchen at night, just beyond the edge of my vision, just out of focus. And sometimes I think I hear breathing that isn't mine,